14th world chess champion Vladimir Kramnik is fighting against cheating on chess.com. He's claiming that chess.com is not doing enough to fight against the cheaters, and there are so many people, so many grandmasters that are playing much above their expected ability, expected results. And one of those, like the biggest example, is Jose Martinez from Mexico. He's known as Jospem on chess.com, and he is playing so amazingly strong in all of those title Tuesdays. So Vladimir Kramnik says, let me play against you, real chess, half of the match online, half of the match over the board, and let me prove that you cannot play as strong as that. Jospem accepts the offer and fights for his good name. Kramnik fights against the cheaters. Both of them say though that Martinez should be the favorite of this match and should win it, although the result of the first day is quite the opposite and it's gonna shock you. Let's take a look at the games and I'm gonna show you what exactly happened in this match of the year. What's up, chess player? So they started the match over the board chess. The first game, Vladimir Kramnik plays ace-white. The game starts with the Catalan opening and a lot of stuff is going on, but we are gonna fast forward to this incredible rook's endgame that they got somewhere around here when black played the move knight to f3 check, forking the king and the rook. Kramnik says, well, I'm not gonna tolerate that, let me remove that knight, and now here we are in this rook's endgame, and something incredible happened, because Kramnik just took the pawn on e5, of course, very important central pawn. Black takes the pawn on g4, which is a mistake. I mean, the best move was try to fight for the first rank and create those checkmating ideas. But here, Kramnik makes a huge mistake. He correctly identifies that the right move should be with the h-pawn. But instead of the right move h4, which creates this threat of rook to g5, and you might say, well, but black can take en passant, and that's right. But that was the idea behind actually Kramnik's move, because now those pawns are disconnected and the king has a way out. Now, instead of that, Kramnik played the move h3, seemingly with the same idea, attacking this pawn, if you take that's fine, but Jospem had a very huge opportunity here. He could have just played, instead of taking it, rook to e8, creating those threats, and once you exchange, then this rook is coming to e2 and this pawn is hanging. I mean, this is completely lost for white according to the engine. And the difference is, if you would have played h4, then after a rook to e8 move, you have this rook g5 opportunity, and this is deadly equal. Later on, we got to this position where black has an extra pawn, and it's a completely winning position because black can use this pawn just to deflect white pieces. Meanwhile, the king should go here, the pawn should be taken, and then the c-pawn should decide the destiny of the game. But unfortunately, the most logical way to do that, king to f5, is a mistake, basically losing the entire advantage from completely winning. Now it's a draw because of just one move, king to f5. And of course, there are just a few seconds for both of the players, so it's hard to blame them. But frankly, the quality of this first game is not that impressive, just a little bit over 80% of accuracy. Probably both players were a bit nervous. So the reason why king to f5 is the wrong move, because now white plays rook to d6. This is exactly what Kramnik did, making the rook very, very active, and well, there is no way to defend the pawn. Once you lose the pawn, you have no chances, and you cannot defend it except for playing this move rook a6. But now the rook is horribly passive. You cannot just do that, and there are no chances to win the game afterwards. Instead, the right move was to play rook to f2 and remaneuver the rook all the way to f6. You cannot play rook d6 now, it doesn't make any sense because of rook f6, and you can never go into the pawn's endgame. It's always lost thanks to this distant passer. Jospem tried to be as active as possible and convert this extra pawn into a full point, but there is no way with this active rook. So the first game ends in a draw. The second game, though, wasn't peaceful at all. So Jospem plays here as white, just played the move queen to h4, attacking this rook on d8. The position is very balanced and the game was balanced up to this point, but unfortunately for Kramnik, he makes a mistake. He plays queen to b8, and you know, you should never go back. This is the Bobby Fischer's rule, and it actually works in life too, because now the queen is passive, even though it's protecting here, it's protecting there, but it's not really creating any threats, and there is an incredible opportunity for white thanks to this free move. The rook is under attack and the queen protects it, so we need to deflect the queen. And Jospem does just that. Bishop goes to a7 attacking this queen. Black plays g5 and now just takes en passant. The queen is still under attack and the position is collapsing completely for black. There is no way to save it. Knight takes, attacking the queen. Now if you take this guy, then this queen is going to be taken and black should be more or less fine. But the problem is nobody is gonna do that. Just queen to f6. Look at this king. It's so vulnerable now. Rook takes d1, just bishop takes b8, and now there are two rooks for the queen, which is normally a good thing. But with such a vulnerable king, it's not possible to actually deal with all of these threats. Now, bishop takes e5 is not even the best move. There was bishop a7, bishop a3, bishop takes h6 idea. As simple as that, just to deliver a checkmate. And very difficult to fight against it. But after that, Kramnik managed to stabilize the situation a little bit. Queen d4, actually the advantage is not that great. But still, it's very difficult with such an open king to deal with all of those threats with just 5 seconds on the clock. It's practically impossible to hold such a position in a real game. Fast forward to this point, white has queen and 2 pawns for the 2 rooks and 1 pawn, but the king is once again vulnerable. And finally, here Kramnik makes a mistake. After queen to a3 check, the king goes to g8, which is wrong. The right move is king to e8, but this is so difficult to understand. And after king to g8, there is f5, the great move. And why king is bad on g8? Because there is this queen to g3 check, forking the king and the rook, and there is no way to deal with it. So bishop takes f5, and afterwards Kramnik didn't take the bishop on f5 because of this queen g3 idea, winning the rook. But anyway, queen g3 check, and Kramnik resigns here. Jospem wins the first game of the match. In the third game, Kramnik played a nearly perfect game, 97% accuracy. And here we have the rooks endgame. Once again, Kramnik plays as white. We have 2 pairs of rooks and the material is completely equal. But for some absolutely impossible to explain reason, Jospem plays here rook to a4, probably with an idea to play d4, but I mean, you could have played d4 anyway. And the problem with that move, it doesn't control the 7th rank anymore, and Kramnik of course uses that immediately, winning the f7 pawn, and the rooks are so active the king is in trouble, and without any problems he converts the advantage here after h5. Black just resigns, there is no way to stop the checkmate, and so Kramnik levels the score. In the round number 4, we have seen the first brilliant move of the match. Kramnik plays as black here, and we see that he is doing very well out of the opening. He just exchanges the knight on c3, and then he makes the brilliant move. Knight to e5. The knight is hanging twice, but you cannot take it, of course, because the queen is hanging on a4 too. And of course you can exchange the queens, but the point of this brilliant move is to take here on an f3 intermezzo move with a check, of course, otherwise you're going to be completely busted immediately. But as is, the queens are just going off the board and there is a horrible pawn structure, and Kramnik continues to just beat the shit out of Jospem in this game. Here the position looks normal again, yes, still there are weaknesses here, the f3 pawn is hanging, but much more important pawn is here on a3, because if you lose it, then there is going to be a password that is going to be protected by the b pawn and supported, and that is not something you can allow. But Jospem does just that. He plays f4, which is a huge blunder, just giving up that pawn, and notice he has a great number of time on his clock and he still blunders like that. Later on, Kramnik comes with a decisive idea of winning the bishop here. He plays g5, sacrificing the pawn on g5, but he doesn't care about it. He even sacrifices the second pawn here on h6 just to play this move f4 and somehow disconnect the bishop from the pawn. And there is no way to deal with it. Jospem takes on h6, but that loses the piece here, and the pawn on h7 is easily stopped by the rook. There is an extra bishop, and Kramnik converts the position without any significant difficulties, because except for the extra bishop, there is also this pawn which decides the destiny of the game. And now Kramnik leads the match for the first time. What is so shocking is that Kramnik himself said in the interview to Gotham Chess before the match he didn't even prepare for it. He had like a day or two of slight preparation, but it's completely not the thing you are doing before an important match normally. Apparently, it is just for fun for Kramnik. Yes, he wants to win, of course. He is a competitive chess player, but he didn't really took it seriously in terms of preparation, in terms of, those opening stuff we all know top grandmasters are doing to surprise their opponents. He just says, well, it's important for me to be in a good shape, and on a good day, I can really get good results. But he said he's clearly the underdog of the match. And Jospem says exactly the same thing in his interview to Gotham Chess. He says, well, I'm gonna win this match. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm definitely the favorite, and I'm sure I'm gonna beat Kramnik. Yet here we are. Kramnik leads in the match, and round number 4, it was very, very high quality game. Both of the players scored above 96%, and we ended up winning this Queen's Endgame, and there is basically nothing you can do about it. Just a draw here, because there are equal weaknesses here. The number of pawns is equal. If you take on b6, black is gonna take there, and otherwise the players just repeat it, because, well, in the Queen's Endgame, almost always you have a risk of just getting into the perpetual check territory, and there is no way to win the game. 3,000 rated game from both of the players, no chance to win. In the very next game, Jospem makes the impossible. He manages to equalize the score. He's playing as white, and the last move, he played knight to h5, putting pressure on this bishop on f6. And, well, you have to do something about it. The right way is either to remove the bishop all the way to a1, but this is such a weird square for the bishop to be, or a much normal move, king to f7, just protecting, because you are completely okay with the changes. The number of material is completely equal, but apparently Kramnik didn't want to have this spin with the bishop on d7. The problem is, though, that he played bishop to d8, which is a huge blunder here. Why? Because now there is rook to b8, really pinning this bishop, and you cannot really deal with it. You can no longer move the bishop because of this pin. So Kramnik decides to remove the second bishop out of the way so that the bishop on d8 is protected. The problem is the bishop is not really well protected on c6, and Jospem uses that, taken on d8 first, taken on c6, and now he has a pair of knights to fight against this one rook, which is of course more than enough to secure a victory, especially since the king is also not that secure. Let's see what happened here. Knight to f4, knight to e5, those knights are controlling all of the squares. There is nothing you can do to save the position. Absolutely no weaknesses for the white side, and just a beautiful checkmate in the end of the day. This king comes to f6, seemingly like an active move, attacking this knight, putting pressure on it, but knight h5 comes as a shock for Kramnik, and Martinez equalizes the score. The next game is something completely unbelievable. Kramnik plays as white here. He has 2 minutes 45 seconds on the clock, pretty much the entire time, and he's playing as white. He's active. He has those threats. This bishop on d5 is so beautiful, the knight on g5 as well. All he needs to do is bring more forces into the game, into the attack. The move f4 is a beautiful example for that, because we are attacking this pawn on e5. There is nothing you can do, because if you just take it, then we are gonna open up the f-file, and the rook joins the attack, and then f7 pawn is just hopeless, as well as the entire game afterwards. And if you take on d4, trying to somehow shut down the file, well, we still go forward and we don't care about anything. If you try to take it, we just take it with the rook, then with the queen. Checkmate is unstoppable. So for such a monster like Vladimir Kramnik himself, the world's chess champion, f4 move is pretty easy to find. I mean, it's straightforward. You open up the line, you add more pieces into the attack. Instead, what he does is just impossible to explain. He plays knight takes f7, just trying to cash in, but it's too early for that. I'm not sure what he could have missed here, because just rook takes f7, the most logical response here, just taking the piece that is moving, and then queen takes d8, another mistake, knight takes, and after taking here on f7, the position is completely lost for white, because you have 2 pieces for the rook as black, and there is absolutely no compensation for it. This is so amazing. From pretty much a winning position, he got into a lost position with a straightforward 3 moves combination. combination, because I can't call it like that. It's so unbelievable. Later on in the game, Jospem got 2 bishops for the rook here, which is impossible to fight, of course, and he just converted very, very smoothly. Bishop to d5. This rook comes to h8 with checkmate ideas, and it's absolutely not possible to fight. You have to sacrifice the exchange, but then it's just an extra bishop without any compensation. Kramnik resigns, and Jospem leads the match again 4-3. The next game is so incredible. It's just a roller coaster of players being completely winning and completely losing. And Jospem makes his first brilliant move of the match. Here, he just played rook to e4, attacking this knight, because the knight is very annoying. He just takes it, but not with an idea to somehow just get rid of this pawn on g4, not to take it back afterwards. No, because the knight was controlling the f6 square, and the queen wants to go there. So this is exactly why Jospem removes that defender from the black side and attacks the king with a check here, and Kramnik makes the mistake immediately, king to f8, because now there is a huge pin here over the f-file, and the e6 pawn can be taken either with the rook or with the pawn. The right move instead was to step back to g8, and then, well, it seems more or less fine here. Maybe he was afraid of rook takes e6, but in fact, it's just equal. There is nothing there for white. But after king to f8, now it's completely winning. Now king goes to g8, but you just lose a tempo like that. And this is the difference between the equal position and +4 for white here. So rook to e7 seems like the most reasonable move in the position. The rook is hanging, so you need to go somewhere, right? And then the f7 is the most vulnerable thing on the entire board, but it turns out the rook to e7 move flips the evaluation of the position from +4 to -0.7. This is so crazy. Why? Because black can just exchange the queens now, and without the queens, it's an extra exchange for black. And this is a completely different story. But this is just the beginning of this crazy game, because it continued to go up and down until the players finally made a draw. Later on, we got this position in the game. Kramnik is completely winning here thanks to this extra exchange and a very unreasonable pawn structure. All of the pawns are on the light squares, which makes this b3 pawn a huge backward weakness, which is very difficult to deal with. But the right move for black was just to play rook to b8. Once again, very reasonable. There is a backward weakness, just attack it with your rook, and it's so difficult to defend it. But instead, Kramnik plays rook to c7, and after bishop d5, the position is equal again. Because white's pieces are so active, because there are threats for the king, and nobody is attacking this weak pawn on b3. The same pattern continues in the game, because yes, now white has this very strong passer along the c-file, but still, black could have played rook b8 even now and still attack that vulnerable pawn on b3, and that would make the position equal. But instead, Kramnik plays rook e3, which is a huge blunder. Why? Because instead of that silly move bishop to d5, white could have just played rook to d7, check immediately, the king has to go somewhere, and then c7, ignoring that bishop completely, sacrifice it, because then rook d8 comes and there is no way to stop the promotion of the pawn. And you're not gonna believe it, but exactly the same thing happens again. In a few moves, Jospem plays here bishop to f3 back, and again Kramnik makes the same blunder. Instead of controlling this 7th rank, very important, and going for this b pawn from this side, he plays rook e3 again, and this time Jospem finds the right idea. He plays rook to d7, check. But after king to f6, the only thing you need to do is to play c7. He doesn't do it. He plays bishop d5 again, being afraid to sacrifice the bishop, and then there is no way to win the game again. Finally, we reached this crazy position. It's so difficult to understand what's going on here. So the pawn goes this side. It's just one move away from promotion, but there is the bishop stopping it and the rook, so it's not really possible to promote it. On the other side, there are protected passers for white going forward, and so with his last move, Jospem is attacking this rook on b8, asking a question: do you want to sacrifice? And according to the engine, the position is completely winning for black, but to win that, you need to play rook c to c8. Can you imagine this move? The idea is so simple, actually. You need just to put the rook on f8 behind the pawn. Remember, put your rook behind the pawn. This is the golden principle of all rook endgames, and then the pawn on f2 is just unstoppable. Instead, Kramnik makes the final mistake of this game. He plays rook takes b5, sacrifice and the exchange back. He promotes his queen, but unfortunately, this is just a draw. There is no way to deal with this b-pawn except for sacrificing the rook, and it's a draw. Jospem himself said in the interview that he's playing so much better the online chess because he trained so much, because it's like he's used to this 2D board, and arguably he should play much better. But on the other hand, Kramnik, he played his entire life offline and he's more used to this format, so logically he should play better offline. But Kramnik says, I don't care, it's chess, whatever we are doing, still the stronger player should win. But it's online chess, and Kramnik just destroys Jospem in this game, the very next one, which is so unexpected. So White is better throughout pretty much the entire game. In this endgame, we have 2 extra pawns for White, but there is still some craziness going on because both kings are quite weak, and this king is, well, quite risky here. If you allow queen h3, somehow that would be a checkmate. If you allow rook e1, that would be a checkmate. So what happens is, White plays rook to e1. Kramnik makes a mistake because he plays rook to e1, seemingly a very reasonable move just to pin this bishop. But the problem is, you are actually not allowed to leave the first rank with the rook, and black can just use it. We are playing bishop to c6. It's actually a double attack here. The bishop is under attack on a4. The rook is under attack on e1, and of course you cannot take it because of checkmate over here, the back rank problem. So this was, I would argue, quite an easy shot for black if, well, you have at least a little bit of time to process it. Of course, with 7 seconds on the clock, it becomes a much more difficult task. And so instead of that, Jospem plays the move bishop to g2. I mean, it's so difficult to explain. Why on earth would you place the bishop on g2 out of the entire diagonal? I mean, there are so many nice squares here, but why would you choose g2 where the bishop is actually vulnerable and where you cannot deliver a checkmate? After rook takes e7, there is no checkmate over the back rank, and White just wins the game. This is maybe the effect of the online chess, because chances are there was a mouse slip at this point. I mean, I can't imagine playing bishop g2 voluntarily. Anyway, Kramnik now equalizes the score. The next game is kind of a masterclass in the endgame from Vladimir Kramnik. He shows here why he was the world chess champion. You can't just get there without a very good reason. There is one exception though. Here, the position is completely winning for black, but Kramnik plays b4, and this is a huge blunder. Why? Because, well, just tactically it works for white. You can just take this pawn on b4, sacrificing the rook, but you're taking it back just a second afterwards with the knight takes d5, but you grab 2 pawns in the process, which makes the position equal. There is still an extra pawn for black, but yeah, it's not enough according to the engine. I understand that in blitz, especially with 6 seconds on the clock, it's still very difficult to make a draw, but at least objectively that's already almost equal. You just play f3, you exchange as many pawns as possible, and then you sacrifice at some point your knight for a pawn, exchange another one, and that's a draw. Unfortunately for Jospem, he completely missed his opportunity. I mean, normally you expect such a talented player, such a huge monster in the blitz chess to see these tactical opportunities, because it literally like takes, check, and he's winning those pawns. But instead he plays knight to a4, and now the position is completely winning again, and Kramnik didn't give any more chances. He just went forward and made sure that those 2 extra pawns actually matter. He's taken here on c5, and even though the pawns are doubled, nobody cares. Too many extra pawns, no way to deal with all of the threats, and Jospem just resigns, and Kramnik leads the match again. Just 2 games left in this first day of the match. It is so spectacular. Here Kramnik plays as white. It's rook's endgame, completely winning for white. You have this b-pawn which is going forward, it wants to promote, but we have so many pawns, so in the right moment all we need to do is just sacrifice the rook for this pawn, and then make sure that one of our pawns promotes, and this is game over. But what actually happened is Kramnik played f5, which is a huge mistake. Why? Because black can now stop those pawns. So instead, you could have just used your king to go forward and then help this pawn, just support it. Now it goes forward without any problems. Yes, you can win it via rook to e3, but rook to e1 and then rook e3, but it doesn't help because that pawn is too weak, and with two connected passers, you can always win. But here instead, after f5 king to g6, how can you make any progress? It's so difficult because the king is stuck. He cannot go here because of the check. He cannot go here because of the check here, and then the pawn promotes. So king to f5 was such a superior move because here the king is guarded by the pawn and you never have a chance to give a check there. So yes, Kramnik of course tried to go forward and repeat the position, but unfortunately as long as this king is on d6, you can never make any progress. And this is exactly what happened. Kramnik eventually played f6 to push forward those pawns, king to e5, but unfortunately this e3 pawn is hanging, and only with one pawn you can never win. And here just king to g7, and that's a dead draw. So such a huge chance for Kramnik in this game, and I would expect like the endgame technique, that would be the part of the game he should be superior because he has such a huge experience and in general he's such a strong player. But apparently with just a few seconds on the clock, he missed this king to d6 idea and his chance to win another game. The last game was just as crazy. Here Kramnik plays as black. He plays king to f3, seemingly a very active move, and white can just control everything via rook to d6, because now the knight cannot move, the rook is hanging. Maybe knight takes f4 was the idea, but unfortunately it just doesn't work. Bishop takes f4 and now everything is hanging. So after rook to d6, it's very difficult to make any moves except for just giving a perpetual check or going back with the king. But instead, Jospem played rook to a6, which is losing completely if you find the right way. So black played rook to d2, this is the correct move, and now the key question, where should the knight go? And unfortunately Kramnik chose the wrong square. He played knight to e3, which is blowing the entire advantage because of just rook to d6, and the d file is under control and there is no way to win the game. Instead, when he would have played knight to c3, that would be a completely different story. First of all, you can never take this knight because it's just too dangerous of a pawn here. After takes back, it goes to c2. You can pin it, of course, and this is the last chance for white, but we can just play rook to d3 and then the pawn is ready to go forward. You can play f5, but the pawn is just not fast enough. f6, just c2, and we are the first ones because it's also a check. Black is completely winning here. And if you don't take the knight, there is an incredible checkmating idea. For example, you play rook to a1, trying to control the back rank, but there is knight to d1. This is incredible, and I can totally understand how Kramnik missed it with 10 seconds on his clock. But the idea is beautiful. Rook g2 now is a checkmating idea. There is no way to stop it. Let's say you play rook to b1, rook to g2 check. Now if you go to this side, this is an immediate checkmate, knight to f2. And if you go to this side, then knight to e3 check, king to e1, rook e2 checkmate. I mean, this is so incredible. That was such a huge chance just to win this game for Kramnik. Instead, he played knight to e3, and now, as I mentioned before, rook d6 would be an easy way to equalize the position. But instead, white plays rook a1, which is another huge chance for Kramnik. Now, the same idea, knight to d1, we just transposed the previous variation, and this is just a checkmate. But unfortunately for him, with 10 seconds on the clock, Kramnik plays knight to c4 back. While it's quite a reasonable move, we are attacking the bishop here and support our pawn. Of course, he wants to promote it further. It doesn't help because now the rook just comes to b1, attacking this pawn and stopping it from going forward. And the knight on c4 just doesn't create any threats for the king. And so this is how the game ended, just with perpetual check here. A huge chance for Kramnik again, but a draw in the end. Overall, you can see that the first day, Kramnik just dominated. I mean, there are some games that Jospem won, but it's just incredible how huge the advantage of Kramnik was on this first day. This is definitely one of his good days, a huge performance here. He won it with 6.5 to 5.5, but he even had so many chances, especially towards the end of the day. He could have easily won a few more games, and then the the score wouldn't be reasonable at all because everybody expected Jospem to win the match. Let me know in the comments what is your impression and what you expect from the next day of the match.